Most people don't search for manifestation videos because life is going well. They search because something feels off. Not always in a dramatic, life is falling apart way. Often it's quieter than that, subtler. It's the feeling of doing everything you were told to do and still not feeling settled. Working hard, staying busy, trying to improve yourself, trying to think positively, trying to move forward, yet there's an underlying sense of strain that never fully goes away. It feels like effort without ease, progress without fulfillment, motion without peace. And that discomfort is what sends people looking for answers. Not because they want shortcuts, not because they want magic, but because they can sense, deep down, that something about the way they've been taught to approach life isn't quite right. And that trying harder doesn't always make things better. That forcing positivity doesn't actually create happiness. That chasing outcomes doesn't bring the relief it promises. So they find manifestation. At first, it feels like a revelation. Like maybe you've finally discovered the missing piece no one explained before. A way to work with life instead of constantly pushing against it. A framework that suggests reality is more flexible than you were taught. That your inner world actually matters. That how you feel and who you believe yourself to be isn't just emotional fluff, but the foundation of your experience. And that idea alone can feel incredibly liberating. You hear about visualization, about intention, about aligning your thoughts and emotions, about becoming a match for what you want. And for a moment, it feels empowering, like you've taken your power back from circumstances, from luck, from other people. But then something very subtle happens, and this is where almost no one slows down long enough to explain what's really going on. Manifestation quietly turns into another project. Another thing to manage, another thing to get right, another thing you feel responsible for controlling. You start watching your thoughts, monitoring your emotions, correcting yourself all day long. Every negative feeling feels like a problem. Every doubt feels like a threat. Every bad day feels like you're ruining your future. Instead of feeling freer, you feel more tense. Instead of feeling more present, you're constantly checking yourself. Instead of living your life, you're supervising it. And the irony is, the very practices that were meant to bring ease now feel like work, mental work, emotional work, constant internal effort. This is the part of manifesting that rarely gets talked about honestly. Most teachings stop at think better thoughts or feel as if, without addressing the internal pressure that comes from trying to hold a state you don't actually feel safe in yet. They don't explain what happens when someone hears, your state creates your reality, and then starts blaming themselves for every unwanted experience. So instead of relief, people feel guilt. Instead of clarity, they feel confusion. Instead of trust, they feel anxiety disguised as self-improvement. And that's because manifestation, as it's commonly taught, often skips over the most important truth of all. You do not manifest from effort. You manifest from identity. You don't manifest from trying to think the right thoughts. You manifest from what feels normal to you, from what you assume without effort, from what you expect without needing to convince yourself. And that distinction changes everything. Because most people aren't struggling to manifest because they're doing something wrong. They're struggling because they're trying to create change from the same internal state that created the problem in the first place. A state of lack trying to produce abundance. A state of insecurity trying to produce confidence. A state of tension trying to produce ease. A state of waiting trying to produce fulfillment. That doesn't work, and it can't work, no matter how many affirmations you repeat or how vivid your vision board is. Here's the part that almost nobody explains clearly. Your mind doesn't respond to what you say occasionally. It responds to what you assume consistently. An assumption isn't something you force. It's something that feels obvious, natural, familiar. For example, you don't wake up every day affirming that gravity exists. You don't visualize the ground holding you up. You don't try to believe in it. You assume it. It's settled. It's not a question. That's the level at which creation actually happens. But most people approach manifesting like they're trying to convince themselves of something their nervous system doesn't yet feel safe accepting. So they end up in this exhausting cycle of hype followed by disappointment, motivation followed by burnout. They feel inspired for a few days, maybe a few weeks, and then reality doesn't immediately change, and doubt creeps back in. And when doubt creeps in, they panic because they've been told doubt ruins everything. So now they're not only dealing with their original problem, they're dealing with fear about their thoughts. That's not empowerment, that's pressure. And pressure is the opposite of alignment. This is why so many people say manifestation doesn't work, even though they've tried everything. They visualized, they affirmed, They stayed positive, they did the techniques. What they didn't change was the underlying relationship they had with themselves and with life. They were still operating from effort, from proving, from trying to get somewhere else emotionally. And here's the truth that almost no one explains plainly. You don't manifest what you want. You manifest what you are at rest in, what you return to when you stop trying, what feels like home internally. That's why some people seem to accidentally manifest things without trying. They're not more spiritual, they're not more deserving, they simply expect things to work out, they assume support, they don't live in constant internal resistance. Their inner world isn't calm because life is perfect. Life improves because their inner world is calm. And this is where the misunderstanding around manifesting really takes hold. People think the goal is to feel amazing all the time. It's not. The goal is to stop fighting what you feel. Because resistance is what locks states in place. Trying to force happiness actually reinforces the belief that happiness is missing. Trying to force abundance reinforces the belief that abundance isn't here. Trying to force confidence reinforces the belief that confidence is something you don't naturally have. The mind hears effort as evidence of lack. So the more you push, the more you unknowingly confirm the very state you're trying to escape. This is why the truth about manifesting feels so counterintuitive at first. Because the shift that changes everything doesn't come from doing more. It comes from relaxing into a different assumption, not an assumption you hype yourself into, an assumption you gently return to again and again until it feels normal. An assumption like, I'm supported, like things work out for me, like I don't need to force life, like I'm allowed to feel settled now. Those assumptions don't create fireworks, they create stability. And stability is what allows reality to reorganize itself around you. Most people are trying to manifest from a place of urgency. They want proof before they relax. They want results before they feel safe. But the nervous system doesn't work that way. Safety comes first, then clarity, then aligned action, then results. And until someone understands that order, manifesting will always feel like effort. This is why the real work isn't controlling thoughts, it's softening resistance. It's learning how to stop arguing with the present moment. It's understanding that your power isn't in mental force, but in the state you repeatedly return to when nothing is happening. And once you see this, once you feel it, you can't unsee it. Because you start to notice that the moments when things shift in your life are never the moments you're trying the hardest. They're the moments you let go. The moments you stop gripping. The moments you stop needing things to change in order to be okay. That's when movement happens. That's when doors open. That's when opportunities appear without strain. And that's what this conversation about manifesting is really about. Not techniques, not forcing belief, but understanding the internal mechanics that quietly shape your experience every single day, whether you're aware of them or not. And once you understand that, you stop trying to manifest life. You start allowing it to meet you where you are. And that's where everything actually begins. Once you begin to understand that manifestation responds to your inner state rather than your effort, something important starts to soften inside you. You stop treating life like a problem to solve. You stop approaching your desires as something you have to wrestle into existence. And slowly, almost without noticing at first, the constant internal pressure begins to release. This is where real transformation starts, not with a technique, but with a shift in how you relate to your own experience. Most people unknowingly live in a state of quiet resistance, not dramatic resistance, not obvious negativity, subtle tension, a constant mental stance of not yet, not enough money yet, not enough clarity yet, not enough proof yet. Even when things are going relatively well, there's often an undercurrent of waiting for something to change before they allow themselves to feel settled. That waiting becomes familiar, and whatever becomes familiar begins to feel like truth. This is how identity forms, not through affirmations, but through repetition. The identity that says, I need to keep fixing myself. The identity that says, I can't relax until things improve. The identity that believes peace is conditional. And life, being a mirror, faithfully reflects that identity back through circumstances that always seem to require more effort, more striving, more proving. Here's something most manifestation teachings never slow down enough to explain. Reality does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you expect. Wanting is restless. Expectation is calm. When you expect something, you don't chase it. You don't obsess over it. You don't constantly check to see if it's arrived. You simply live as though it's already accounted for. And that internal posture is what allows things to materialize naturally. This is why some people seem to move through life with ease. They're not more spiritual. They're not more deserving. They're simply less resistant. They assume things work out and they assume support is available. They assume life responds favorably to them. And because those assumptions are quiet and consistent, reality organizes itself around them without friction. Now, contrast that with how most people try to manifest. They visualize intensely, repeat affirmations, create vision boards, and then spend the rest of the day monitoring themselves for doubt. They treat their mind like a fragile machine that might break the moment a negative thought appears. This creates hypervigilance, and hypervigilance is a form of fear. Fear tightens the system. A tightened system cannot receive. The mind cannot create from strain, it creates from coherence. When your inner world is fragmented, when part of you wants something and another part is bracing for disappointment, the dominant signal is instability. And instability tends to recreate more instability. This is why manifestation feels inconsistent for so many people. It works sometimes, and then it doesn't. Not because the law changes, but because their inner state does. Here is a truth that is both simple and uncomfortable. You are not manifesting from your best moments. You are manifesting from your baseline, from the emotional and psychological place you return to when nothing is happening. From the version of you that exists between inspiration and disappointment. That is the state life responds to most consistently. This is why awareness is more powerful than effort. When you start noticing how often your mind postpones relief, how often it says, once this happens, you begin to see the pattern that has been quietly shaping your experience. You realize you've been living in rehearsal for a future that never arrives because the present moment was never allowed to be enough. And the moment you see that clearly, something loosens. Not because you force it, but because clarity dissolves illusion. You realize that the struggle itself was never required, that the tension you've been carrying wasn't a sign of commitment. It was a sign of mistrust. Mistrust in life, mistrust in timing, mistrust in yourself. This is where a deeper understanding of manifestation begins. Not as a method to get more, but as a realization that the state of inner stability you've been chasing through outcomes is available now. And when that stability becomes your starting point rather than your goal, your entire relationship with desire changes. Desire no longer feels urgent. It feels natural. It no longer feels like something you're missing. It feels like something unfolding. And that subtle difference changes how you move, how you decide, how you speak, and how you respond to opportunities when they appear. This is also why letting go is so often misunderstood. Letting go does not mean giving up on what you want. It means releasing the belief that your well-being depends on its arrival. The moment your nervous system stops treating the desire as a lifeline, you stop sending signals of lack. And lack is the only thing that ever blocks flow. A regulated, grounded inner state perceives possibilities that a stressed mind cannot see. It hears invitations instead of threats. It notices openings instead of obstacles. This is not metaphysical, it is neurological. Calm expands perception, tension narrows it. And what you can perceive determines what you can experience. So the real shift is not learning how to ask the universe for more. The real shift is learning how to stop arguing with the present moment. Because the moment you stop fighting where you are, you stop reinforcing the belief that where you are is wrong. And that belief is the root of almost every manifestation struggle. When that belief dissolves, action becomes cleaner. You don't act from panic. You don't act from fear of missing out. You act from clarity, from alignment, from a quiet sense that nothing is chasing you and nothing needs to be forced. And those actions, when they arise, tend to be perfectly timed. This is the paradox that confuses most people. The moment you stop trying to manifest, manifestation begins to happen naturally, because what you were really trying to manifest was relief. And relief only comes when resistance ends. And when resistance ends, life finally has space to respond. That's where things start to move. Quietly, naturally, inevitably. Now here's where things start to click in a way that actually changes your day-to-day experience. Because once you see how manifestation really works, you realize you do not need to fight your mind, fix yourself, or become some perfectly aligned person before things can improve. You only need to understand how your inner state quietly directs your outer world, moment by moment. Most people believe their thoughts create reality, but that is only partially true. Thoughts come and go all day long. You have thousands of them. If thoughts alone created reality, your life would be absolute chaos. What actually creates is the state you live from beneath the thoughts, the emotional posture you return to again and again, the inner position you stand in while life unfolds. You can think positive thoughts while living in a state of waiting. You can repeat affirmations while feeling unsure. You can visualize while still identifying as someone who does not have what they want. And that underlying state will always win. The state is what manifests, not the effort. This is why people say manifestation feels inconsistent. Sometimes things work, sometimes they do not. But it is not random, it is state dependent. When you feel relaxed, grounded, open, and internally stable, things tend to flow. Conversations go better, opportunities appear, timing improves. When you feel tight, anxious, desperate, or impatient, things feel blocked, delayed, or heavy. The mistake most people make is trying to change their circumstances in order to feel better. But the order is reversed. You feel better first, and circumstances reorganized to match. Not because you are forcing them to, but because you are no longer resisting what is already trying to move toward you. Think about how many times in your life something showed up when you stopped obsessing over it, when you let go, when you relaxed, when you were not trying to make it happen. That was not luck. That was alignment. You were no longer gripping the outcome. You were available to receive. Your nervous system plays a huge role in this. A body that feels unsafe sends a constant signal of lack. A body that feels settled sends a signal of trust. The universe responds to the signal, not the words. That is why calming your inner world is more powerful than visualizing harder. This is also why doing less can sometimes create more. When you stop monitoring progress, when you stop checking if it is working, when you stop measuring yourself against timelines, you free up energy, and that energy becomes movement instead of resistance. A practical way to work with this is to notice what you are assuming without realizing it. Not what you say you believe, but what you expect. Expectations reveal your true state. Do you expect things to work out or fall apart? Do you expect people to respond or ignore you? Do you expect money to come easily or only through struggle? Expectations are silent assumptions, and assumptions harden into experience. If you want to shift your life, start by gently shifting what you expect, not through force, but through familiarity. You introduce your nervous system to a new normal, a normal where things can go right, a normal where support exists, a normal where you are not constantly bracing. You do this by practicing small internal agreements with yourself. Not big dramatic claims, but subtle permissions. Things like, it is safe for things to work out. It is okay to relax right now. I do not need to solve everything today. Something can move even if I am not pushing it. These are not affirmations meant to convince your mind. They are invitations meant to settle your body. And when your body settles, your state shifts. When your state shifts, your perception changes. And when perception changes, reality follows. Another key point most people miss is that manifestation is not about getting something new. It is about allowing what is already possible to reach you. Desire exists because the fulfillment already exists. You are not creating from nothing. You are tuning into something that already wants expression through you. When you stop seeing yourself as someone who has to earn alignment and start seeing yourself as someone who can allow alignment, everything changes. You stop chasing, you stop fixing, you stop proving, you start cooperating with life instead of wrestling it. This does not mean you stop taking action. It means your action comes from clarity instead of pressure, from inspiration instead of fear, from steadiness instead of urgency. Those actions carry a completely different energy, and they produce very different results. Notice how often your best ideas come when you are relaxed. Notice how solutions appear when you are not forcing them. That is not coincidence. That is how intelligence moves when it is not being interrupted by tension. Manifestation becomes simple when you realize you're not here to control life, but to align with it. You're not here to demand outcomes, but to become available for them. The moment you stop trying to make something happen and start assuming it can happen, the entire dynamic shifts. And this is where things begin to feel almost unfair in how easy they become. Not because life suddenly hands you everything, but because you are no longer standing in your own way. As this starts to sink in, you may notice something subtle but powerful. You feel less rushed, less tight, less like you are behind. And that feeling is not a byproduct of manifestation. That feeling is the doorway to it. At this point, it becomes important to talk about what you can actually do with this understanding in a real, grounded, everyday way, because manifestation is not meant to live only in theory. It is meant to change how you wake up, how you move through your day, how you respond to challenges, and how you relate to your desires. The first practical shift is learning how to recognize when you are operating from effort versus alignment. Effort feels tight, it feels rushed, it feels like urgency mixed with pressure. Alignment feels calm, steady, and clear, even when you are taking action. Throughout your day, start checking in with yourself and asking a simple question. Am I doing this because I trust, or because I'm afraid nothing will happen if I stop? That one question alone can interrupt patterns that have been running for years. When you notice you are acting from fear, the goal is not to stop everything or judge yourself. The goal is to soften. Take a breath, slow your body down. Even 30 seconds of conscious breathing can shift your state enough to change the outcome of the moment. Manifestation responds faster to a regulated nervous system than to a perfectly worded affirmation. Another practical tool is to change how you end your day. The state you fall asleep in tends to become the state you wake up in. Before bed, instead of reviewing what went wrong or what is missing, choose one thing that felt supportive that day. It can be small, a conversation, a moment of quiet, something that worked out. This is not gratitude as a performance. This is training your system to notice stability instead of lack. Over time, this rewires what you expect from life. During the day, pay attention to your internal language, not to correct it aggressively, but to gently redirect it. When you hear yourself saying things like, "This is not working, I am behind, nothing is changing," pause and reframe in a way that feels believable. Try something like, "Things are moving even if I cannot see it yet," or "I am allowed to be where I am while things unfold." Believability matters more than positivity. Your body has to agree for the shift to hold. Another powerful practice is reducing how often you check for results. Constantly looking for evidence keeps you anchored in waiting. Waiting signals lack. Choose set times to review progress, and outside of those times, return to living your life. Engage with what brings you ease, creativity, or presence. Manifestation accelerates when you are occupied with life, not monitoring it. You can also work directly with assumptions by writing them down. Take a few minutes and write the assumptions you carry about money, relationships, success, or yourself. Not the ones you wish you had, but the ones you notice in your reactions. Then ask, is this assumption something I learned or something I chose? Most assumptions were absorbed, not decided. That means they can be replaced. Choose one assumption to work with at a time. Replace it with something slightly more open, not extreme. For example, instead of money is hard to get, try money responds to how I relate to it. Instead of relationships never work out, try healthy connections are possible for me. Live from that assumption for a week. Notice how your choices shift. Notice what you see that you did not see before. Another practical step is learning to pause before reacting. Reaction locks in old states. Pausing creates space for a new response. When something triggers you, instead of immediately labeling it as a setback, ask, what am I assuming right now? Often you will find you are assuming danger, rejection, or failure. That awareness alone loosens its grip. You can also deliberately practice states without needing a reason. Sit for a few minutes and feel what steadiness feels like, or ease, or confidence, not tied to an outcome, just as an internal environment. This teaches your system that these states are accessible now, not only after something happens. That is a major shift. You stop outsourcing your emotional state to future conditions. One of the most overlooked practices is allowing yourself to enjoy what is already working without guilt. Many people block manifestation because they feel they should not relax until everything is solved. But relaxation is not a reward. It is a signal. It tells life that you trust the process. When you allow yourself to feel good now, you remove resistance. Finally, remember that consistency matters more than intensity. You do not need to overhaul your life in one day. Small daily shifts compound. One calmer response, one assumption questioned, one moment of presence. Over time, these become your dominant state, and your life reorganizes around it. Manifestation becomes reliable when it becomes ordinary, when it is no longer something you perform, but something you live. And the more you practice these simple, usable steps, the more natural alignment feels and the less effort life requires. At the end of all of this, the most important thing to understand is that manifestation was never meant to feel like work. It was never meant to feel like chasing, fixing, or constantly correcting yourself. The truth that almost nobody explains is that manifestation responds to who you are being far more than what you are doing. And who you are being is shaped quietly, moment by moment, by your inner state. When people struggle with manifestation, it is rarely because they are doing it wrong. It is because they are trying to manifest from a state of tension. They are trying to create from a nervous system that feels unsafe, rushed, or behind, and life faithfully reflects that state back to them, not as punishment, not as failure, but as feedback. Once you see this, everything softens. You stop asking why it is not working and start asking who you are being while you are waiting. You begin to notice that the moment you stop gripping the outcome, things move. The moment you stop demanding proof, proof begins to appear. The moment you stop forcing alignment, alignment becomes natural. This is why people often say things showed up when they stopped caring, when they gave up, or when they focused on something else. It was not indifference that helped them. It was release. It was the absence of resistance. It was their system finally allowing life to meet them. Manifestation becomes reliable when you treat it as a relationship, not a technique. You learn to listen to yourself. You learn to notice when you are pushing. You learn to come back to steadiness instead of urgency. You begin to trust that movement does not require panic and progress does not require pressure. From this place, action feels different. You still take steps, you still make decisions, but they are not fueled by fear, they are guided by clarity. You act because something feels aligned, not because you are afraid of falling behind, and those actions tend to open doors instead of exhausting you. This is also where patience transforms. Patience is no longer waiting with frustration. It becomes presence. You're not waiting for your life to begin. You are living it while it unfolds. And paradoxically, that is what allows things to arrive faster. One of the most freeing realizations is that you do not need to monitor yourself constantly. You do not need to catch every thought. You do not need to stay high vibration all the time. You only need to return gently and consistently to a state of trust. Life responds to your dominant state, not your occasional doubts. You're allowed to have bad days. You're allowed to feel tired. You're allowed to pause. None of that stops manifestation. Resistance comes from fighting where you are, not from being human. As you move forward, let manifestation become simpler. Let it become quieter. Let it integrate into how you breathe, how you rest, how you speak to yourself, and how you respond to uncertainty. When your inner world stabilizes, the outer world follows. It always does. And one day, often without a dramatic moment, you will realize that the thing you were trying so hard to create is now part of your normal life. Not because you forced it, but because you became someone who could receive it naturally. That is the truth about manifesting that almost nobody explains. It is not about control. It is not about effort. It is about alignment becoming your default and trust becoming your foundation. When you live from that place, life stops feeling like something you have to manage and starts feeling like something that is responding to you. And that is when creation becomes effortless, grounded, and real.